Hey everybody, Ozark Elman here. I wanted to show you a nice little backdrop of castle in Bulgaria because what I'm talking about has a lot to do with ancient European history and the history of the ancient European people, and how it pertains to us today. Because I have seen, I mean, a lot of people. There's a big, massive, coordinated movement against Christianity. We have things like Christian nationalism, and by the way, on this channel, I've focused before in the past on politics, geopolitics, culture, and all that. I especially love history, the stories of my own ancestors, my own people, all that. And a lot of our own people, as Western nations, and particularly Western people, are pretty hated and loathed by our own media. Just Google white people, scroll down through the results, you'll see. I've covered all that in the past. Um, it's pretty clear that people are starting to try to look into their own history, look into their own past, stories of the past. Hollywood has really been pushing a lot of the ancient European history and then putting their own, especially an anti-Christian spin. This is really nothing new. See a lot of anti-Christian stuff from Hollywood. When you kind of look in the origins of Hollywood and everything, it makes a lot of sense. But I've seen a lot of the people who claim to care about their own people, who claim to care about the European people, and yet they want to destroy 2,000 years of European history because they do not like Christianity. They claim to be open minded. They claim to be, a lot of times I've seen them claim that they are ancient European pagans. They've kind of revived paganism and all that, polytheism. And yet at the same time, they say that they don't take it seriously. So really, they're people who run with the mythos of their ancestors, not really believing it, and they're really secularists, atheists, agnostics, etc. So though they claim to care about the ethnically European people, our diaspora, and all that, they're against the culture of the last 2,000 years. That doesn't make sense to me. They run with the culture of those who really kind of hate my people, also hate our faith and are trying to destroy it, doing everything they can. If they had their way, many of them would make traditional Christianity, biblical Christianity, illegal. So why would those who care about our people be against our faith? Well, they say that it's a Middle Eastern concept, that it's not really European, that it destroyed the ancient European traditions. Well, there were times that, yes, Christianity was forced on pagans by the sword. There were also times, though, that pagans forced their own version of paganism on other European pagans with a different mythos by the sword. Case in point, the Romans with Gaul. Why the French are speaking French today and not a Celtic language. So I would submit that any criticism you level historically against Christianity, well, I could say the exact same thing about our pagan ancestors. Whether it's morality, rise and fall, you see similar patterns. But the key thing, what about the Druids? The Druids were the most well learned and really powerful class of ancient spiritual mystics in probably the entire Eurosphere of all the European peoples. They spent 20 years training, and here's a key thing about why I bring it up. Because everybody that says Christianity just wiped it out by force, it was forced upon them by the sword, that did not happen with the Gaels or the Irish. Patrick went to them. Now, the thing that I really don't like, and this is kind of a source of a lot of division and why I think it really does not serve Christianity, because it's not a biblical concept. Just like politicizing power in, through state and all that with Christianity is not something that's not supposed to be done. Because the myth that people made up about Patrick centuries later is kind of an own on the old Druids and pagans, was to say that he was, of course, was a slave, probably of Britain himself, brought to Ireland, was when he was free, went back to Britain, and then as he learned to be a Christian, when he accepted Christianity and learned about Christ and Christianity, he went back to Ireland and got an audience with the King of Ireland, and that he basically wiped out a bunch of the Druids with and drove the snakes out of Ireland, it said, and he wiped out the Druids using miracles, with physical force even. That the Druids went up to fight him and challenge him, but he just wiped him out. And it was almost like some kind of vengeance because he was a slave in Ireland. He got back at them and destroyed their Druidism, destroyed everything. And, well, that's not the case. In fact, it was quite impossible. Because here's the thing, the Druids, not the king, had all spiritual authority in Ireland. The Druids weren't fools either. They trained for 20 years, but they didn't write anything down. Christian monks did, and that's how we know a lot of things, but it's from a Christian monk perspective, so a lot of people don't trust it. But here's the thing. Like I said, Druids, this is what is well known, well recorded even by pagan Romans about them, so it's not even from a Christian perspective. The Druids had all spiritual authority over the people of Ireland, not the king. They even had judicial authority, judging, justice, solving lawsuits, disputes between neighbors. Some of it would go to the king, but in matters of judgment and law, and yes, all spiritual things, it had to be approved by the Druids. So even if Patrick got an audience with the King of Ireland, which he apparently did, and the King of Ireland accepted Christ, and by extension, the people of Ireland ultimately accepted Christ as well, the Druids, who studied for 20 years, they were not under any duress, not under any force, not facing any military threat, somehow, for some reason, chose to accept Christ. Why? Well, look at the Old Testament and then look at a lot of the European mythos. It's pretty clear that it's the stories of our own ancestors. Many of the kings, even after, like King Alfred, the European kings claimed direct descendants from Woden and a lot of the deified figures, Jupiter from the Romans, that they got from Iapetus from the Greeks, they claim to be direct descendants of, and that matches up with Japheth in the Old Testament. And many of the names, Tiras, son of Tiras is Tyr, son of Japheth or Jupiter to the Romans. So again, a lot of the names and everything matched up, and the Druids would have known this. They believed it completed the picture. They deified their ancestors. They did things like human sacrifice. And then, the Old Testament, a lot of the mythos, I should say their mythos, who knows what prophecies or anything that they had that apparently Christ fulfilled, because they en masse accepted Christianity. So when anybody tries to say that Christianity is not the New Testament was written in Greek. God was the God of all men, not just, of the Jews. Some people are saying, it's just we're under Middle Eastern control because it was a Middle Eastern religion. Well, no. Historically, Europeans were the ones who accepted Christ. Christ itself was a Greek name, Christos. The New Testament was written in Greek. It went to the Europeans. We were the ones who claimed the promise, and it says, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. And it said Christ was the Christ of all men. A chosen people doesn't mean chosen to rule over and dominate and destroy all the other nations. Chosen for what? A purpose? To produce a Messiah? To write things down? Well, the Druids adopted a written language. We adopted a lot of Arabic numerals from the Middle East. We adopted, and a lot of the Semitic peoples. You see a lot of similarities between Semitic polytheism and European polytheism. A lot of influence back and forth. The Greeks had some Semitic little g gods and vice versa. A lot of the cultures influence each other. You see a lot of similarities between heaven and hell in both the Old Testament and the European mythos. But our own ancestors, and this is the key point I want to get across, our own ancestors at the very time, not from old writings that they tried to piece together about ancient beliefs and myths or anything like that, but they themselves, who trained for 20 years from this entire ancient line of a spiritual class, they decided that yes, Christ was the Messiah for all mankind, including for the European peoples. And they accepted Christ, and the people accepted Christ. And for well over 1,000 years, our people have followed Christ, and we have been the Christian people of the earth. We have claimed that promise. So yes, it is the faith of our people, our culture, our ancestors. It did not destroy. It changed. And it fulfilled, according to the ancient Druids at least. So for anybody trying to diss Christianity and Western culture by extension, and saying Western culture and people should not be Christian, look at the past. Look at why our ancestors accepted Christ in the first place. Because to them at least, when not under duress, when not under the sword, not being spread politically or by force, their highest spiritual class accepted Christ as a fulfillment of prophecy. And thus, by extension, our descendants and our ancestors and the ancestral blessings we have from being the nation whose God is the Lord and the people whose God is the Lord. Yes, it is a personal decision of faith. It is also a blessing and a promise to a people, we the Western people. And each people in each nation can worship God, and they can accept Christ, and they can follow in the Bible, and that is the faith for that nation and that people. There are different nations and there are different peoples. And each nation, I believe, can have their own promise if they claim it. If they want to be a nation whose God is the Lord. If someone doesn't follow my faith, but they're part of my people, they're still a part of my people. That's why it's by faith and not by force, and it should not be by force. That's why it very clearly states that in the Bible. But blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. And for well over 1,000 years, as our own ancestors, the spiritual class of our ancestors decided, Christ did fulfill their own prophecies and their beliefs and their legends as the Messiah of all mankind, not just some Middle Eastern mythos that was forced upon Europeans, no, but as the God of our people and the Savior of our people. This is Ozark Yeoman. I'll have a good one.